I'm Michelle, and today we're going to be exploring how to deal with misinformation and bias in history, especially in regards to using history textbooks as standalone resources in the history classroom. The article that I have based this podcast from is called The Story of Ourselves, Fostering Multiple History Perspectives, and is from the journal called Social Education.
First of all, let's look at what bias actually is. The Oxford Dictionary defines bias as being an inclination or prejudice for or against one person or a group, especially in a way considered to be unfair. The Collins English Dictionary defines bias as being an irrational preference or prejudice. This is something that we as history teachers have the privilege of exploring in our classrooms. It is our chance to be able to show our students that whatever their textbook presents to them about a particular aspect of history, that it is not the only perspective and that it is subject to bias. In saying this, school textbooks are screened before publishing and they do undergo a rigorous process. Nevertheless, textbooks only provide a limited view on history, selecting valuable sources that aid the topics that are being explored. The article brings up a really good point and says that we have often presented a narrow view of history to our school children, giving them the impression that there is little, if any, variation in the interpretation of our past. William Bigelow progresses a step further, saying that students don't know that year after year their textbooks, by omission or otherwise, are actually lying to them the whole time. This is quite true to a certain extent. Some teachers teach their history students in the form of a textbook class where their only resource is the prescribed textbook. This may be due to limited funding or time restrictions. Nevertheless, the textbook should not be the only resource used in the history classroom. According to the article, when a textbook is used as the only source of information, students tend to accept the author's statements without question. The article also says that the unconscious presentation of just one side of an issue which distorts reality by making it seem that the one position is all there is worth considering about the issue. I offer you a gentle reminder that people will always view historical events from different perspectives. This is why we need to present more than just the textbook in the classroom. I am in agreement with the article when it says that recognition of multiple historical perspectives is fundamental to good history teaching. For example, let's just have a look at this elephant. All these people are touching and looking at the same animal, yet they all think that it's something completely different. Using multiple perspectives gives history its depth. And from this elephant example, this is how we should present history in our Stage 6 classrooms, from multiple perspectives. And if any of these perspectives have bias, then the teacher and the student will be able to identify them. They can then analyse it. Ask why that source may be biased. What is the perspective? What's the context? Maybe it was used as propaganda. These are all questions that we as Stage 6 history students and teachers can ask of our students when exploring sources. According to Hayden, unless two versions of the same set of events can be imagined, there is no reason for the historian to take upon himself the authority of giving the true account of what really happened. Teachers and students alike need to remember this when they are dealing with sources in the history classroom. The article brings up another really valid point where it says that simply presenting students with multiple perspectives may give them the impression that all perspectives are of equal worth. It's up to the teachers to help students learn how to evaluate the merit of a particular interpretation of historical events. Identifying bias is an incredibly useful tool for Stage 6 modern history students. First and foremost, this stuff is in the syllabus. In both preliminary and HSC, under the process of historical inquiry, the syllabus asks students to locate, select, and organise relevant information from different types of sources, analyse and evaluate sources for their usefulness and reliability, explain and evaluate differing perspectives and interpretations of the past, and to plan and present the findings of historical investigations, analysing and synthesising information from different types of sources. That's in the HSC, but in the preliminary course where the students are required to do a historical investigation, the syllabus asks students to use a variety of sources to develop a view about historical issues, as well as to identify different historical perspectives and interpretations evident in sources. The HSC exam asks them to look at sources and analytically devise how useful the sources for historians researching a particular topic. In this, they must consider the perspectives and the reliability of these sources, and they will be searching for the bias sources and how historians in the modern world would use that source in their research. It's a really useful tool. Not only will it be assessed in their HSC, it is a valuable life skill that will assist them in their day-to-day life. They can read any news bulletin or article and then they can assess it for its reliability. They can identify it if it's a heavily one-sided and if it's majorly biased. They can ask why and how the author created it to be that way. The article says that making judgments based on a well-rounded gathering of information is a vital critical thinking procedure. The article presents case studies on several parts of American history. In one particular textbook, the Holocaust is given a single paragraph. That doesn't provide any room for perspective at all. This particular textbook doesn't even mention the words art, music, or poetry in its index. This suggests that political and military issues are the only topics worth discussing in the history classroom. Another example is Columbus, in which the particular textbook omits the Native American perspective on Columbus. They instead only present a Eurocentric point of view, completely disregarding Columbus's cruel treatment of the native people. Despite the intentionality, omitting multiple perspectives has debilitating effects on the students. The article suggests a method to combat dealing with biased textbooks as the only source in the history classroom. It suggests that teachers use trade book literature, that is, literature that is marketed to the general public, as opposed to specialised audiences such as academic journals. Most fiction novels, such as To Kill a Mockingbird and When Johnny Went Marching, are really great examples of trade book literature. And Levstick sees this as being a wonderful influence by inviting the reader to enter into a historical discussion that involves making judgments about the issues of morality. He asks the following questions. What is it like to be a person here? What was the nature of good and evil in that time and place? And with whom shall my sympathies lie? Adding trade book literature into the content allows students to develop high levels of critical reading skills, such as determining the reliability and authenticity of printed sources. In this way, teachers should definitely guide students towards reading trade book literature that provide conflicting perspectives. This in turn will encourage students to make historical judgments as well as hopefully stimulate their interest in that particular topic. Many pictures, books, biographies, novels, and informational books have been published that can provide alternate perspectives on particular historical events. To use the example before about Columbus, there have been many books that portray his conquest in a more varied form than most school textbooks. An excerpt from a trade book highlights the Native American view when Columbus is putting many Native Americans in captivity. The Native American comments that he would never forget the look of grief on his face. A phrase like this would not have been mentioned in that previously mentioned textbook, but it highlights the emotions of the Native Americans who are really essential characters in the Columbus story. Another example that the article presents is based on the topics of the Civil War, the American Civil War. The article suggests that the students read about the Constitutional Convention from the Black American perspective, and that this will help students gather a broader understanding of the motives leading up to the US Civil War. The students could learn about this topic through certain books, or they could learn about it through songs, such as Deep River, Motherless Child, and Nobody Knows the Trouble I See. Even in these titles, historians can see the value of viewing trade literature in conjunction with their history textbooks. In order to help students compare and evaluate these historical accounts, the article provides some questions that allow students to critically inquire into their selected topics. Question 1. How factually accurate was the account? What was omitted that in your judgments would be important for a full understanding of the topic? Number 3. What motives does the book give to your topic? Number 4. Who does the book get you to root for, and how does the author accomplish this? What function do the pictures in the book play, and what do they communicate? Number 6. In your opinion, why does the book portray your topic in the way that it does? And can you think of any other groups in society that may have an interest in people having an inaccurate view of history? By doing this kind of study on Columbus, school students came to see that both sides had merit and that the issues were anything but simple. This is different to what the textbook was saying. Studying trade books alongside the history textbooks can allow students to identify bias, understand multiple perspectives, and hopefully grasp a wider understanding about historical topics.
I hope you learned something from this podcast. but I will leave you just as the article has left me. It says that understanding history is a matter of understanding human motives, because motive is intertwined with individual perspective about life's events, and we must consider these multiple viewpoints if we hope to make sense of our heritage. Therefore, history is the story of ourselves, and history-related trade books, both fiction and non-fiction, are one of the finest sources for providing young students with a broader, more complex, and more fascinating approach to telling the story of ourselves.